Have you ever wondered why certain aspects of your personality, those feelings or behaviors you try to avoid, seem to emerge at unexpected moments, as if they have a life of their own? What happens when we ignore these parts of ourselves? And why, often, the more we try to flee from them, the more they chase us? Let's imagine a seemingly calm, polite, and well-adjusted person, someone who has never lost control or shown weakness. One day, this person finds themselves in a situation of extreme pressure, perhaps a work disagreement or a personal conflict, and suddenly reacts in a completely disproportionate manner, with irrational anger or aggression. This outburst doesn't seem to align with their everyday identity. But what lies behind it? This phenomenon is exactly what Carl Jung, a Swiss psychologist and one of the most influential figures of the 20th century, referred to as the shadow. Jung defines the shadow as everything within us that, for some reason, we decide to hide or reject. These are the aspects of our personality that do not fit with our idea of who we should be, that leave us vulnerable, or that simply do not conform to social expectations. This shadow is composed of traits, emotions, or impulses that, if not recognized and integrated, gain power over us, often manifesting in unexpected ways. Jung, in observing human psychology, noted that throughout life we develop defense mechanisms that allow us to avoid the pain or shame associated with these hidden aspects. But the truth is that by ignoring them, we are allowing them to become stronger, more distant from our conscious perception, until they become dangerous, like a monster fed by denial. To illustrate this theory, let's look at a real and historical example, the case of Hitler. Jung analyzed how Adolf Hitler and other extremist leaders projected their shadows onto society. According to Jung, instead of confronting and integrating the dark parts of their psyche, these individuals externalized them and channeled them into an enemy. This phenomenon of projection, attributing our undesirable aspects to another person or group, is one of the most intense and destructive ways the shadow manifests. This denial of the shadow affects not only public figures but all of us in our daily lives. Often, we are so focused on maintaining a socially acceptable image that we ignore what is really happening inside us. And so, the shadow grows, invisible, until one day, unexpectedly, it comes to the surface. As we proceed, we will understand how the shadow acts in our behavior and how we can learn to integrate it in a healthy way. The first step towards this is recognizing that, no matter how much we try to avoid it, our shadow will always be there, ready to be integrated and transformed. Now, I invite you to reflect: what is hidden in your shadow? What aspects of your personality have you been trying to deny or hide? Think about this as we continue together on this journey of self-knowledge. The shadow is not just an intriguing idea but one of the cornerstones of Jungian psychology. Jung believed that to truly know ourselves, we needed to confront these hidden parts of our psyche, those we prefer to avoid, but which are always present. By ignoring our shadow, we create an internal division, a disconnection between who we really are and the idealized image we want to project to the world. The concept of the shadow is directly connected to what Jung called the personal unconscious. While the collective unconscious, which is the part of the psyche that contains the archetypes shared by humanity, connects us to a deeper dimension of human experience, the shadow represents the most intimate and often repressed parts of our identity. These are the impulses, fears, and desires that we do not accept or understand. Jung did not see the shadow as something to be avoided but as something to be recognized and integrated. The key to a healthy life, according to him, lies in integrating the shadow into consciousness. This means acknowledging the aspects we deny and, by doing so, transforming the energy of the shadow into something constructive. Jungian psychology advocates that the process of individuation, the path to the full development of the human being, is only possible when we can consciously embrace our shadow. This idea aligns with the concept of projection. When we deny our shadow, we tend to project it onto others, seeing in them the aspects we cannot recognize in ourselves. This creates an emotional distance and distorts our perception of reality, as we are constantly seeing in others the parts of ourselves we do not want to admit. The integration of the shadow is a challenging process but fundamental to achieving true authenticity. To understand how the shadow operates in our lives, we can look at historical, mythological, and even everyday events that illustrate how repressed aspects of the human psyche emerge unexpectedly. A classic example comes from Greek mythology, the myth of Oedipus. In trying to avoid his fate, Oedipus kills his father and marries his mother, unknowingly fulfilling the prophecy he tried to evade. This type of behavior is a form of shadow manifestation, an unconscious attempt to escape something that, paradoxically, ends up becoming reality. Jung used this myth as a metaphor for the individuation process, the journey of self-knowledge in which a person needs to confront their shadows. Oedipus's error is a projection of what he did not want to face, his fate. In this case, fate was the shadow he feared, and by trying to avoid it, he made it more powerful. This phenomenon is not exclusive to mythology but is something present in our daily lives. Another example comes from the political realm. Adolf Hitler himself, as I mentioned before, is an emblematic case of how the shadow can project itself on a large scale. Jung observed that Hitler's ideology was not just an expression of one individual's beliefs, but a collective projection of the shadow of an entire nation. By externalizing the darkest parts of the human psyche, such as hatred and intolerance, he created a narrative that allowed people to align their own shadow with his, making it socially acceptable but destructive. These examples show that the shadow, when unrecognized and unintegrated, can take on destructive forms, not only in the individual but in society as a whole. The idea that our hidden behaviors and emotions can affect our reality is not exclusive to Jungian psychology but resonates in various fields of modern science. Neuroscience, for example, has shown how unconscious mental processes shape our perception and reactions without our full awareness. The concept of the shadow, in many ways, aligns with the theory of the unconscious, as advocated by Freud, but with a crucial difference. Jung believed that the shadow is not merely a repository of traumas and repressions but also a point of creative potential and personal evolution. Quantum physics also offers fascinating insights. The idea that reality is multifaceted and exists in states of superposition until observed closely resembles the Jungian notion that the human psyche consists of multiple aspects, some conscious and others not. When we do not pay attention to our shadows, they remain in a latent state, out of our line of sight, yet still influence our behavior. By recognizing them, we can observe these parts of ourselves and thus bring them to light. Furthermore, philosophers like Friedrich Nietzsche, who discussed the concept of the Übermensch, the Overman, emphasize the need to integrate our dark aspects to achieve a higher state of existence. Nietzsche saw the shadow as a force that could propel us beyond self-imposed limits, something that, when embraced, allows for the flourishing of human potential. This integration of the shadow, viewed through both the lens of science and philosophy, is not a simple task but necessary for us to fully understand our psyche in the reality in which we live. Have you ever felt disconnected from your own emotions, as if you were living a version of yourself that doesn't completely align with what you feel or desire. This is quite common. In times of stress or crisis, unexpected reactions often arise, such as outbursts of anger or anxiety, which seem to spiral out of control. What lies behind these reactions? Largely, it is the shadow, the part of ourselves that we try to hide or ignore. These manifestations of the shadow often occur when we attempt to repress certain aspects of our personality, such as our fears, insecurities, or unconfessed desires. Have you ever noticed how, in some situations, you might project these repressed parts onto other people? It could be a friend, a coworker, or even a stranger. This happens because, by failing to recognize certain aspects of ourselves, we begin to see them in the people around us, judging them for what we cannot accept in ourselves. However, true change only happens when we start looking inward. When you recognize your shadows, instead of projecting them onto the external world, you begin to understand the deeper causes of your reactions and emotions. The shadow, when integrated, becomes an ally in the process of self-knowledge. Imagine that you come to better understand your reactions of anger or fear and can respond to them in a more balanced and rational way. This does not mean suppressing these emotions but recognizing them and using them as a tool for growth. Integrating the shadow is not easy, but it is a crucial step toward living a more authentic and conscious life. Acknowledging what is hidden within you is the first step toward true transformation. The integration of the shadow is often seen as a process of acceptance. However, there is an even deeper and more transformative aspect that few discuss: the idea that the shadow is not something to be simply mastered or corrected. The turning point of Jungian analysis occurs when we realize that the shadow, when brought to light, not only reveals traits of our character that needed acceptance but also presents us with a new way of being. By embracing the dark parts, we become more whole and freer. This expanded view of the shadow is not just about what is painful or repressed, but about the creative power that resides in the unconscious. Often, the parts of the psyche we try to avoid are the most innovative, the most authentic, and the most original. When our energy is not consumed by resisting these parts, we can finally begin to use them constructively. Jung believed that by reconnecting with the shadow, we can discover talents, motivations, and potentials that we never imagined we possessed. Those aspects that once seemed uncomfortable or wrong can transform into powerful forces for personal evolution. When someone opens up to their shadow, they not only resolve internal conflicts but also begin to expand their consciousness beyond the limits imposed by society or excessive self-criticism. The true turnaround happens when we realize that our shadow is not a burden but an unexplored source of vital energy. The process of individuation, far from being merely a struggle for self-acceptance, is a journey to rediscover who we truly are by recognizing our deepest parts and even our vulnerabilities. When reflecting on the shadow, it is impossible not to notice that throughout life, we all carry this other half of our psyche, which, if unrecognized, ends up manifesting itself in unexpected and often harmful ways. However, it is important to remember that the process of integration is not an end but a continuous quest for self-knowledge and self-understanding. When we finally stop fearing what is hidden within us, we begin to live more authentically, more aligned with our true nature. The shadow, far from being something negative or merely an obstacle to be overcome, can be seen as a vital part of our psyche that, when well understood and integrated, becomes a source of power and creativity. By acknowledging our weaknesses, fears, and impulses, we are able to transform them, not only into more balanced aspects but also into creative forces that drive our personal growth. Jung invited us to look within and confront our shadows, not as a burdensome task but as an opportunity to become more whole. The path is not easy. Integrating the shadow requires courage and honesty with oneself. But as a result, we achieve a state of greater inner freedom, in which we free ourselves from the conditioning that limits us and become more fulfilled in our essence. So, what do you choose to do with your shadow? Will you continue to avoid it, or will you allow yourself to experience the process of acceptance and transformation? Reflect on this. And if you found this content interesting, like, share, and subscribe for more reflections like this. The journey of self-knowledge is never too much.